Hello and welcome to Wild Sounds Civilized, your monthly podcast about literature, music, and everything betwixt. I'm Bailey Duff.
I'm Emily Cait. This is the introduction to our podcast.
This is the brag trap.
It is. Okay, so you maybe came from my YouTube channel. I make YouTube videos about books on children's literature, gender studies, fantasy literature, Stephen King, all that fun stuff. And I do that mostly with, I guess, an academic eye. I did the traditional university education. I got my BA in English Lit and Women's Studies, and then did a master's, and
all the fun stuff.
Yeah, just all the fun stuff.
All of the fun stuff. So I'm coming from, I don't want to say a radically different place. I will say just a different place. I am a music educator. I work for a not-for-profit that works in schools that maybe don't have the best music funding. And I go in and I teach music at an elementary level. And I also manage a music academy where lessons are taught. So my background was with the Royal Conservatory. It was not a traditional academic background whatsoever. And I think I'm really interested to find out how our styles of analysis differ and how they come together and how we can cross-reference.
Yeah.
I know, I'm saying all the exciting words, aren't I? In particular, how we can sort of explore works that relate to both of our interests and both of our realms of expertise. You coming from this really strong background in literature, specifically in women and children's literature, and me coming from a lot of classical music and then a lot of children's music. Not that we will be speaking exclusively about children. What does Wild Sounds Civilized mean to you?
So this comes from a quote. Do we remember the guy's name?
It comes from a quote. Oh, man.
I wrote it down.
Okay, good.
Thomas Fuller. And so I believe the context for the quote is that music makes wild sounds civilized.
Yeah, that music is wild sounds civilized. That's all it is taking sound and organizing it in pleasing ways, sometimes unpleasing ways that please you with how unpleasing they are. But the same can be said of most sort of oral stories, folktales. Mm-hmm. And the same can be said about kind of what we're doing. I think we're taking our first reactions to different works and trying to cobble together our thoughts, throw them out there at the wall, and present them to the civilized world.
I would agree.
I think it's fun to think about what wild and what civilized mean in terms of art. I think I kind of feel a little bit sarcastic about the title, to be honest with you.
Yeah?
In that calling any sort of art wild or civilized is
Loaded.
so loaded. So incredibly loaded. I mean, I would call anything by George Crumb wild, but that doesn't mean it's not civilized.
Who is George Crumb?
Sort of a more modern composer. So a couple wacky things, maybe with extended technique, where you're playing your instrument not in a way that you traditionally would.
Is he kind of like the postmodernist Beckett of music?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of those, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I mean, the fun thing with classical music in the past 100 years or so is that everybody kind of ran out of sounds at about 1920, I would say. Started cribbing from jazz, started figuring out what you could do with these weird things in your hands. I mean, I've seen some pretty cool concerts that involve some pretty wacky sounds. But I would say I largely enjoy the ones that are slightly more traditional, not because they are more traditional, because they just put me in a happy, happy place. What is your wild and civilized example for literature?
I guess the pretentious one is Samuel Beckett. Like any of the postmodernist people who were trying to play with the limits of literature.
Yeah.
So I think it's Beckett that this is one of the least accessible examples possible, because anything popular that anyone will have read isn't breaking boundaries.
Right.
But there's a piece that Beckett wrote called Malone Dies, I believe, where he is trying to write the moment of death, not the experience of dying, and not the reflection of someone being dead, but the capture in writing dying itself. And it's a really bizarre piece to read.
Yeah. I mean, as somebody that has only really read the classics, I think I tried to read Ulysses, which sounds to be similar levels of opaque. And I tried to read House of Leaves.
I hate that book.
I also hate that book.
I hate footnotes, and I hate running around with turning the book upside down. And
I hated the narrator to the point where it made it uncomfortable to continue. I liked the old man, and I was okay with the family, but that weird edgelord, I just couldn't. Every time he spoke, I was like, I hate you. I just don't want anything to do with you. Just go away. I actually considered trying to read it without his parts, and I didn't care enough.
I feel like that's one of the books that I understand what it's doing.
Yeah.
I totally get it. Like, even down to the title, like House of Leaves, like the physical object
book, yeah.
is...
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem, I guess, a sort of accessible form of postmodernism.
Yeah.
In that it's all literal. There's
Yeah.
there's puns involved.
Yeah.
Everybody loves a good pun. I don't know if there's a musical equivalent to House of Leaves that's
What
not...
about that guy? It's 4 minutes and 31 seconds
Oh, John Cage, 4:33. Yeah, actually, I'm going to go out on a limb right now and say that I enjoy 4:33. It's a huge meme. I know it. Everybody knows it. First comment in any thread about, what's your favorite piece of music is 4:33, lols. But what he was trying to capture was when you're at a live event and you're about to hear music and you hear the musicians get on stage and they're ready to go, and there's that, crescendo of silence. I sound so pretentious right now. And it's that. For 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Which, I get it. It's pretty goofy now, looking back in time. But, I don't know, I happen to love that goosebumpy feeling before music.
Didn't he also write a piece that is still being played? It's one note... it's conducted so slowly. Yeah,
there's a bunch of stuff like that, actually.
There?
And I would say, I think maybe the better comparison to House of Leaves would actually be Philip Glass, who, again, pretty postmodern. He's doing these pieces that involve these short motifs that kind of repeat over and over again and change in the repetition. They kind of lull you into something. And also, created languages chanting in ways that are vaguely pan-human in a fun way.
Okay.
But in a way that I find sort of not as offensive as House of Leaves, but perhaps not as interesting as other things that we'll talk about, I guess.
Yeah.
What are we going to be talking about on this podcast?
All of the things.
All of the things. I am especially excited about music that has words and words that talk about music. I think especially because I don't think you experience words as words when they're sung. They feel different to me.
Right.
And I think that the interpretation of them is really interesting. How do you listen? How do you read? Do you listen or do you read? If you're going to hear an opera, are you observing it the same way you would as if you just read the text like a poem? Obviously no, but how is that different?
Right.
Or words talking about music, the experience of listening or creating, and how we absorb that. Again, that's interesting. That's fun. What are you most excited to talk about?
It'll be interesting to talk, I think, just face to face with another human being.
Yeah. Wow.
I know
groundbreaking.
It sounds kind of sad.
We just trashed all the postmodernists, and now we're talking face to face with a human being. We're making news, guys.
I know. But it's been a while since I was in school, and so I think when you're in grad school, you do sort of collect people with different backgrounds, different experiences, coming to the same text, and so it's everybody bringing all this different baggage. Yeah. So I think that's what I'm most excited about, is that we're looking at the same text from two completely different perspectives.
Yeah.
And
absorbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I never had that exactly what you're talking about, that absorbing the same text and discussing it. I went through the Royal Conservatory Certified Teacher Program, and as a result, I was basically just studying for a wacky amount of exams every few months and just sitting these 2-3 hour exams and not really having classmates. From what I've heard, music school tends to be like that in general from the friends that I have that have been there, because you're studying individual works anyways. Even if you're working in an ensemble and you're working on the same things together, you're working on different things on your own because you need to improve, and everybody needs something super individual. So I'm excited to do this for the first time round, other than like high school English, I guess. Especially because I do a lot of music analysis geared towards children and young adults, and I'd like to talk about it at a deeper level, and at a level that doesn't purely focus on how you play something, but on how you interpret and understand and actually take in a piece of art. Art is so interesting. I'm never not ready to talk about it.
I feel like that's perfect too, because that was my research area, right? Children's literature.
Yeah, we're both coming from it with a sense of childlike wonder.
Yeah.
Yay! Thanks for listening, and please tune in to our next episode, our first episode in a little bit. It is Peter and the Wolf by Sergei Prokofiev.
And so we'll be talking a little bit about fairy tales there, the Disney adaptation.
Bassoons.
A lot of bassoons.
Stay tuned. Thanks for listening. Wild Sounds Civilized is recorded on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe and Attawandarong peoples. Transcripts are available on our website.
Our intro music is Fantasia in D minor by Georg Philipp Telemann, performed by Duff. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Wild Sounds Civilized with a Z. You can email us at wildsoundscivilizedpodcast@gmail.com. And if you liked what you heard here today, you can support us on patreon.com/wildsoundscivilized.